Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to be looking at the connection between joint mobility and balance. We're going to be assessing the single leg balance clock, and I want to connect any areas in which we feel imbalance, a greater sense of imbalance or instability on one leg, right leg versus left leg, and specifically where those imbalances are, to joint mobility, hips, spine, shoulders. So we're going to start with a balance standing clock assessment. We're going to pay attention to where we feel most unstable in that assessment. And then we're going to compare that to where we notice joint immobility on the right side versus the left side, so that we can see how joint immobility leads to poor balance and stability in our standing, walking, gait, things like that. This is important because I get a lot of clients who are fall risks in their gait mechanics, tend to trip a foot, be a little unstable. The more we can work on good joint mobility, assessing our balance clock, getting into that joint mobility, and then improving that clock tends to lead to better outcomes with balance and stability and preventing falls. So let's get started. So we're going to start with an assessment of our balance clock. I have a staff handy. If balance is a challenge for you, where getting onto one leg tends to be unstable, we can use the staff to add a little bit of extra stability. We can have the staff right in front with two hands, one hand. I want to try to have as little grip on the staff as possible. As we get better using the staff, we can really get to where we're not even gripping it so hard. We come to where we just have a hand on top, or even just a finger. That little bit can help provide a little bit more stability. And eventually we can hopefully set the staff off to the side and not use it at all. I'm going to go without the staff, but the staff is allowed for our assessment purposes. We're going to start with our balance standing clock. I'm going with my left foot. Really want to work with a nice spread, open, grounded foot. And the most important thing with the balance standing clock is that we're maintaining that tripod stability. Ball of the big toe, ball of the pinky toe, and heel all remain in contact with the floor. So I don't want that foot rolling back and forth where the big toe or the pinky toe continue to get lifted off the floor. Got to maintain that good grounded nature of the foot. So we'll start by lifting up that back leg. And at this point, I want to imagine we're standing on the face of a clock, and we're going to explore all the different numbers of that clock. So we can start with, just going to 12 o'clock, working to 1. And what I want to really notice is, as I'm reaching and I want to kind of extend those toes, how much stability do I have through that grounded foot? And not just when I reach, but also, can I come all the way back up to full tall before I reach to that next number? And as we work our way around that clock, I want to pay attention to, is there a particular direction that I go where all of a sudden everything gets wobbly or wonky? I'm super solid going straight, not too bad going to 2. As I come out to the 3, it feels a little less stable. Moving back to 4, I want to start to let the hips open up a little bit. 5 is a little shaky. 6 is not too bad. As we're working around to our 7 o'clock, I'm opening those hips, continuing to reach with the toe tips, coming back up, and then we can work to 9. And really 9 o'clock is about as far as we'll be able to go, and then bringing it all the way back up. And we're going to switch and do the same thing on the other side. So my left foot, relatively solid, a little bit of shakiness in a couple of positions, but nothing too serious. This is my repaired knee. I've had 5 surgeries on this knee. I have true joint instability. This tends to be a less stable leg. So again, spreading those toes, grounding the foot, finding that balance point to start with, and then slowly working through each of the numbers of the clock. Again, 1 or 12 o'clock's not too bad. We're working in the opposite direction. So 11, 10, and each one I'm seeing if I can get a little further into those reaches without losing stability. So I move to that kind of 8 o'clock. I'm letting that hip open up. Ooh, that got a little shaky. So as I'm moving to that 7 and coming back up, my knee is a little shakier. It's a little less stable on this leg. Again, as we start to open up, ooh, that one's really challenging right there. So working to my, is that 5 o'clock or so? A lot more instability. See my hands start to move around a little bit. This is a particular angle of my positioning that I struggle in. And you can imagine this as a position of gait. As I'm taking a step onto that front leg, my left hip is back. And as I come out, lift that foot, if I have poor stability right here, that is going to be a position in which I'm more of a fall risk. We'll go ahead and work that last position, reaching to that 3. And that one's not too bad. So we're going to assess this a couple more times through the class. Now we're going to go ahead and get into a little bit of joint mobility. We're going to work shoulders, hips, and spine, and then we're going to come back to our standing clock to see if we get any improvement. So with our staff, I want to get about a shoulder width grip on the staff. I'm imagining that we're bending or breaking the staff in 2. And I want that bend to come at the wrist, the elbows, and the shoulder blades. So wrists are turning in, elbow pits are spiraling up to the ceiling, shoulder blades are packing down onto the back. We're going to start with the staff in front at our hips, coming into our breath. Nice inhale in through the nose. Fill up that crocodile breath on the inhale. Exhale out through the mouth as we draw that navel up and in. As we inhale, allow the pelvis to tilt forward so we get a nice big sway in the low back. Exhale, drawing that navel in and scooping at the same time. As we scoop, you should feel that the glutes kind of tighten up and engage in the back. We still got that nice bend or break in the staff on our next inhale. As we exhale and scoop, we're pulling those elbows up and seeing how far can we move those elbows to our ears or behind without losing our scoop. So I don't want to be sway in the back as my arms are up. I'm scooping, rib cage is down, core is engaged, squeezing elbows back. Inhale, we can fill that belly up. We can allow a little sway in the back. Exhale, actively scoop as you pull. And we'll do 10 nice little exhales, seeing if we can draw those elbows back just a little bit further on each one. After 10, we're going to bring the staff down, move it behind our body. Palms are going to flip so they're facing backwards. We're continuing to bend the staff, but I want to bend it away from the body. So those elbow pits are still spiraling forward. And the more they spiral forward, we should see our shoulders round and pack down and back. So I don't want shoulders rounded forward with this big rounded upper back. I want to feel that spiral, get a little bit of stretch in that upper chest. As we inhale, nice inhale into our crocodile breath. Exhale, lifting elbows up to the ceiling. Inhale, lightly letting it soften. Exhale, squeezing into it, lifting a little higher without forcing it. I want to continue to actively bend the staff as we lift. So we're feeling that active spiral through the elbows as if you're trying to continue to bend or break that staff away from the body as we lift. The more we get that active spiral, the more we're going to feel some nice stretch and opening up of that upper chest area. Again, 10 reps will be good. And then we're going to spiral the palms to the opposite direction. So the palms are now facing forward. Everything else is the same. We're still bending the staff away from the body. Elbow pits are spiraling forward. Nice inhale into that crocodile. Exhale as you draw the navel in. Lift and squeeze. And as we're getting this nice lift and squeeze, notice the fronts of the shoulders. Is there some tightness and restriction? Is it greater on one shoulder than the other, especially in this very front area of the shoulder? That can be an indication of some shoulder instability and can be a part of what's leading to some balance issues. We'll go ahead and set the staff off to the side. We're going to come all the way down to the floor. And we're going to get into a V-sit. So nice wide sit, actively reaching the knees to the floor, actively pulling the feet towards the shins. Hands are coming down to behind the hips. I want to ground through the palms, spiral those elbow pits out and away so that we feel that nice lifted chest, shoulders packed, down and back. We're focusing on those kneecaps, spiraling the knees out and away as if you're trying to touch the floor on the outside of the legs as we exhale. Inhale as we come to center, and then spiraling those kneecaps internally like you're trying to touch the floor on the inside of your legs as you exhale. This one is a really good assessment point for balance. Notice the kneecaps. Does your right knee or your left knee internally rotate more? Does your right knee or your left knee externally rotate more? You might find that one leg internally and externally rotates more or less than the other leg, or you might find that one side internally rotates more and the other side externally rotates more. And again, those are going to be really important assessment points, especially if you notice that there was you had a greater instability on one leg than you did on the other leg. That's going to be an issue of mobility within that hip, internal to external rotation. That's a big function in our gait mechanics, as well as just our overall balance. We're now going to move into our shin box position. I'm on my left side shin box. Left palm is down, grounded to the floor. Elbow is spiraled out and away, packing shoulder down and back. Nice tall spine. I want to be shifted over a little bit so I'm more on my left hip so that that right hip is off the floor. I don't want to try to sit and push that hip down. I want my weight over on the left side so that hip is free. And we're going to move that back hip first, starting with just our breath. Nice inhale, filling up, let that breath come down and fill up that bowl of the pelvis. So you feel that pelvis sink as if it's trying to touch the floor. However, I don't want to shift my weight to make it touch the floor. So I'm seeing, can it reach to the floor without shifting weight? As we exhale, we're lifting it off the floor, moving that hip bone as far forward as we can, and then actively scooping that tailbone into it so that we feel that nice stretch through the front of the hip. Inhale, feel the weight, move into that hip, dropping it to the floor. Exhale, lifts it off the floor, reaches forward, scoops. Notice that nice stretch through the front of the hip. We're going to do 5 of these. Nice, slow, each one squeezing into it a little bit more. The more that hip moves forward and we scoop into it, the more we should feel that glute tighten up and activate in the rear. What I want to watch out for on this, though, is as we move that hip forward, I don't want to turn chest and shoulders. That can take away from what we're focusing on at the hip. I want to keep that nice, solid, grounded shoulder. As we move that hip forward and scoop into it, not a lot of excess movement. I'm not sticking out my rib trying to get a little bit more range. It's all coming from just that pelvis. We'll go ahead and slowly move to the other side. Again, right shoulder, palm is down, grounded to the floor, elbow spiraled out, packed shoulder, weight is shifted over onto the front, the right hip so that that left hip is off the ground. Inhale into that back pelvic bowl, filling it up, letting it reach to the floor. Exhale, it lifts, moves forward, and scoops all at the same time. Now, again, this is another really important assessment point for our balance clock, especially if you had some differences from one side to the other. How does this hip feel? How much mobility do you have? Is it more or less mobile? My left hip, it doesn't get down to the floor as much on the inhale. It's a little tight, tighter and more restricted on my exhale as I scoop into it. Maybe you got about 10, 15 degrees less mobility on this side compared to the other. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a substantial amount when it comes to the rest of how the kinematics of how the body functions in gait. Because if I got 10 to 15% less mobility in this hip, that's going to mean some different mobility in the spine when I'm standing on this hip compared to what I have available on the other side. As we get to our 5 reps, we're going to move back to the other side. And we're going to do the same pattern. Inhale into that back hip. Exhale, scoop. We're going to do 5 more of these, and then we're going to add another layer into it. And you should notice just coming back to the same movement a second time, the hips feel a little bit more freer. The mobility is a little bit better, simply just because we got some lubrication to the joints. The body has a little bit better idea of what we're doing. On the 5th one, as we inhale, filling up that hip, exhale, scoop. Actively scoop into it. I want to lock into that scoop so we feel that stretch. And now we're adding in our reach with rotation. So moving through my knee, I'm reaching with my hand. I want to spread the hand as wide as possible, extend the elbow fully, and then spiral that palm up to the ceiling. Inhale, we're bringing it all the way back in. I'm bending the elbow, spiraling the thumb up to the ceiling as I come back to my starting point, filling up that back bowl. Exhale, lift, scoop, lock in that hip. Spread hands, extend elbow as we spiral that palm up. I want to feel this first stretch through the front of that hip, and then we're adding to that stretch by reaching and rotating. And the more I keep that first stretch as I spiral into it, I should notice it move up into the obliques, and maybe we get some stretch into the low back and even up into the shoulders. Notice how tight it is and where it feels tight and how far you can go. Because this is another, again, we're going to compare this to the other side. As we slowly move to the opposite side, palm is grounded, spiraled out elbow, packed shoulder, shifted weight. We're going to start with our 5 breaths into that back hip. Feel it drop towards the floor. Exhale, lift, scoop going forward. Now, coming back to this hip, It's still tighter than the other side, but it's significantly more mobile than it was just the first time, which again goes to why I want to do my joint mobility early in the day so that I have good access to mobility for my gait mechanics when I start moving through my day. If this hip is stiff in the morning, it's going to be stiff on every activity I do, and that's going to create more imbalance in my body as the day goes on. Once we get to that fifth one, inhale as we drop, exhale as we lift, scoop. I want to lock in that back hip as much as you can, and then adding in, spread hands, extend elbow, spiral that palm up. Oh, and this one's a lot tighter in more than just that hip, also in that rotation of my spine. Inhale into that back hip, exhale as we lift, scoop, and spiral into it. With each one, I want to see if we can squeeze a little bit more range. Can we get more spiral, more extension? Can we get those fingertips to reach a little further without forcing it and without moving into pain? How much different does this side feel compared to the other side? And if you need to go back and forth a couple times to really get a sense of comparison, that is a good thing. If you feel a difference on this side compared to the other, that is going to be a contributing factor in our balance clock, especially if you found your clock was more unstable on one side than the other. All right, coming back to our starting side, we're now going to bring that hand that's been on the floor off the floor. Forearm's going to be flush with the ceiling. We're going to get into some side body mobility on this part. We're going to continue to inhale and allow that breath to fill up that back bowl, pelvic bowl, reaching it to the floor. On our exhale, it's lifting and scooping so that we're getting that same locked in hip. And then we're continuing to exhale as we lift our elbow like we're trying to touch the ceiling. Inhale, bring that breath all the way into that pelvic bowl. Exhale, lift, scoop, reaching that elbow. We can also downwardly press through that hip like we're trying to get as long from the hip to the floor through that elbow. And ideally, that elbow is reaching through our ear, not in front of our head. That will bring that mobility more to the front of the core. I want to feel this as much through that side body, reaching straight down. Elbows are reaching straight up through the ear. See if you can feel that through that side body, low back, abdominal core area. Notice how tight and restricted does this feel at the back hip, side body, and shoulder on this side. And then we're going to go and do the same thing on the other side. So that hand that was down again comes up. Forearm is flush with the ceiling. Right off the bat, this side is tighter just getting into this position. So I'm less mobile before I even start the rest of the movement. This right side low back is generally one of my areas where I have some chronic tension and immobility. Inhale into that pelvic bowl. Exhale as we lift, scoop, and then reach that elbow up to the ceiling on that exhale. Inhale brings it back into that pelvic bowl. Exhale, lift, scoop. We can also downwardly press through the same side hip as we reach up through that elbow. Again, keeping that elbow reaching through the ear, not in front of the head, not behind the head. Straight through that side body, elbow trying to touch the ceiling. As I'm getting into it, it's starting to loosen up and become a little bit more mobile. We'll bring it back to the other side, and now we're going to get into our folds. Again, each of these assessments is really, really crucial to kind of getting that picture of what's going on in our balance clock. So hopefully you're getting some notes, kind of noticing what is different on the right side compared to the left on each of these movements. For this one, I want shin to be square with the shoulders. So my shin angle and my shoulders are even. Hands are going to be even with the shoulders as well. We're going to continue to breathe into that back hip. On the exhale, we're lifting and scooping actively, locking in that back hip. And then we're going to reach both hands, sliding them forward through the shin as we exhale. Inhale, bringing it all the way back, filling up that bowl, letting that bowl reach to the floor. Exhale, scoop, lock it in, and see if you can reach a little bit further. Now notice, where do you feel the tightness and tension on this? How far are you able to go? Is it still in that back hip? Hopefully that back hip's starting to become a little bit more mobile the more we're working through it. Do you feel it in your low back as you get into your fold? Do you feel it up into your shoulders? Maybe one shoulder feels tighter and more restricted. All these areas of immobility are going to be important factors to notice and pay attention to. Once we've done 5 folds on this side, we're going to switch and do the same thing on the other side. So again, that shin angle is square with the shoulders. Hands are square with the shoulders as well. Nice inhale into that pelvic bowl. Exhale, lift, scoop, lock it in as we start to fold. Oh, and this side is tighter. It's tighter in this back hip as well as in my right glute. Inhale, fill up that bowl. Exhale, lock it in. Nice forward fold. Each one, we're seeing if we can get a little bit further. So this is a significant imbalance on this side for me. Front of my left hip, back of my right hip. Tighter on this on this particular movement on this side compared to the other side. The other side, this feels way easier and more free. So this tension that I'm feeling is a factor in my balance clock, especially when I'm on my right foot, which was the less stable leg. So now we're going to start to work side to side with this. I want to really work to open, get some good movement into the hips. We're going to do 10 up to 20 reps. I'm less concerned about that shin angle and the shoulders being square, and I want to just be nice and exploratory with it. Nice exhale as we reach. Inhale brings us up, and then we'll transition across with another inhale and exhale so that we're ready for exhale and inhale so that we're ready for a nice fold as we get to the end. Go nice and slow on these. I do not want to be in a rush. I want to move kind of at the speed of my breath. In breath, I want to be fairly slow. 5 to 8 second counts for inhale and exhale. As you're going back and forth, notice the difference. How is it on the right side compared to the left side? Notice where it feels tight and restricted, because those are going to be joint mobility area or areas that we want to put some extra focus of our mobility. Once we've gone back and forth about 5 times, we're going to start to open up our shin angle by sliding that back leg back a little bit more. That will change a little bit of where you're reaching, which is fine. I want to be exploratory. I don't always want to reach in exactly the same direction. However, whatever I do on the right side, I want to do the same on the left side so that I can compare. So whatever that angle is of the hips, as you get into that reach and fold. And this side, again, tighter through my left hip, My right hip is getting a little bit looser. And with each one, we're going to open up that back leg a little bit more and a little bit more. And I want to continue to be in my assessment mode. Even as I'm opening up that back leg, the right side shin box is definitely the tighter side, but I still want to pay attention to any tightness that's on the side that feels easy. As I start to open up this shin box angle, I have a little bit of tightness in my left glute that I did not notice earlier. So just because one side is tighter in certain positions doesn't mean you're not going to find immobility on the other side in other positions, and that's going to be relevant. So I want to keep my assessment open, so I'm kind of paying attention to all of it. It's very easy to kind of notice the very loud things in the body and to get hyper focused on those to where you don't notice the less loud things, but those less loud things are important as well. Definitely feel that left hip a little bit more, especially as I open up that shin box angle, getting closer and closer to what we'd consider a yoga class pigeon pose. And my left hip is starting to get a little bit more mobile as we go. All right, so we're going to come back up to a standing position. So we're going to do some foot mobility. We're going to use the wedge. We're going to start without the wedge, but we're going to bring the wedge into it. So I want to get some good foot mobility so that we can get the connect how the mobile feet relate to mobile hips. So I got a nice wide stance. I'm bringing my right foot just a little bit forward, shifting my weight onto that right foot just a little bit. And then I want to lightly lift that right heel off the floor as if you're going to slide a piece of paper underneath that heel. I don't want that heel to be super high. I want it to be just barely off the floor. Spread your toes and the ball of your foot as wide as you can. I want to maintain that contact to the ball of the pinky toe, ball of the big toe. From here, with that weight shifted, we're lightly moving that knee in and out. And I only want to move that knee as far as I can maintain grounding through the entire forefoot. So if that pinky toe is rolling off the floor, you're going too far. Or the big toe is rolling off, it's going too far. Even load through that forefoot as we move that knee in and out. Then we're going to switch and do the same thing on the other foot. So again, foot comes forward, shifting weight lightly over it. Spread those toes in the ball of the foot. Lightly lift the heel. So the heels of this, you could slide a piece of paper. Then focusing on that knee and maintaining contact through the ball of the foot. And notice, is it harder to move your one knee compared to the other, especially with, can you maintain that good grounded nature of the foot and have that knee travel the same distance? Or is one side tighter and the foot moves a lot more on the floor, you can't ground it as well? That's going to be an indication of some immobility at the foot. And that's going to be a huge factor when it comes to our balance and stability. Once we feel balanced on each side with that movement, we're coming back to the right foot slightly forward. We're now going to move the wedge at a 45-degree angle so that it slides underneath the ball of the big toe, ball of the second toe, and a little bit underneath the ball of the third toe, but the ball of the fourth and fifth toes are on the floor. The toes themselves can all be on the wedge, but the ball of the foot You can see sideways here. I'm at this angle. My fourth and fifth toes are on the wedge, but the knuckle part of the ball of those toes is on the floor. I also want to continue to feel that nice spread ball action of the foot. Lightly lift the heel off the floor, shifting our weight lightly into it. And we're going to do the exact same thing with the knee. Turning that knee in to out, but maintaining that grounding through the ball of the big toe and pinky toe. Might be a little harder to do on the wedge because the wedge is changing that angle through the ball of the foot. You should more than likely feel a little bit more intensity of stretch and mobility within the foot. And how tight, how tense, how restricted it feels is worth taking note of. Again, I don't want to push that knee so far that the foot is coming off the ground. I want to maintain that pinky toe and big toe, grounding, staying in contact with the floor. And we're going to switch and do the same thing on the other side. So left foot's forward, sliding underneath the ball of the big toe, ball of the second toe and third toe. Shifting weight over, lightly lifting that heel, spreading the toes, and then getting that nice rotation, turning that knee out, and then turning that knee in. And as I turn that knee, I'm not shifting the rest of my body. My body weight is not shifting back and forth. I'm keeping it over that foot. Toes or ball of the foot is spread, grounded, and connected to the floor. So interesting thing is I got some good tightness and tension on that right foot. My left foot feels less mobile. A little bit more tightness and restriction as I roll out. And I just don't feel like I roll in quite as much. We're going to let the wedge go. We're going to stay nice and wide. I want toes straight forward. Heels are now going to be resting on the floor. So I want good tripod feet, not just bipod. So both feet are straight forward. We're going to do a little bit of our step under progressions. Slowly letting our weight shift into our hip, letting that hip drop towards the heel, actively keeping the opposite knee straight. In fact, I'm kind of reaching that knee back and maintaining that same grounded nature through that foot. As I'm moving away from it, I don't want my pinky toe lifting off the floor. I want to maintain that downward pressure. Inhale as I come back up. Exhale as I sit to the other side. As I'm sitting side to side, I want to feel my weight of my hips moving back into my heels. I don't want the heel lifting up. That heel is lifting up, it means your weight is shifting forward through your hip. I want that weight sinking back into the heel. Inhale as we come up. Exhale as we do the same thing to the other side. Now, as we're going side to side with this, we should feel a nice little stretch through that inner thigh on the side we're moving away from. We're also getting into a little bit of activation of that opposite side hip, especially of the glute. Do you have good mobility? Do you feel comfortable sitting into that hip? Do you have a good ability to maintain stability through that opposite foot? How big is that stretch through the inner thighs on the right side compared to the left side? How deep are you able to go on each side? Good. All right, so now we're going to come back to our standing clock assessment. So again, if you need to use the staff, you're welcome to use the staff. We're going to spread the toes wide, find that nice solid grounded foot coming up into single leg balance, and we're going to start exploring the face of that clock. Nice reach to each number. Go slow. We really want to test our balance and stability. The slower we go, the more we're going to expose where there might be wobbliness, where there might be instability. And if you notice that one angle of your reach gets a little shaky, come back and reset, and let's really assess how much or how well can you balance and control through that reach and coming all the way back up to standing. My left foot actually feels a lot more stable. I got a few little shakes in there. It feels considerably more stable than it did at the beginning of the session with our first assessment. That actually felt really solid. I'm curious what the right foot's going to feel like. So as we come to the other side, again, spread those toes, knuckles of the foot wide, grounding through the heel, ball of the foot, finding that single leg, and we'll do our same nice slow reach. Like to point those toes in each one. Little instability in that right leg. I'm going to go back to it. That got a little better on the second one. Right leg is still a little shakier. My knee is a little wobblier, a little harder to control, but it's significantly improved from the beginning of the session, from our first assessment. Still have some instability, especially as I come back up to this top point. Find that my hand wants to reach out to kind of find that balance point. But again, this feels a lot more stable than it did with the first round. I'd say considerably more, especially as I get back into these areas. I'd say difference is pretty decent. All right, so we're going to finish. We're going to actually come down to the floor. I want to now do a little bit of assessment through our baby rolls. So hopefully we got a good amount of information as far as hips, and you know, a little bit going into our spine and shoulders and how that relates to our balance clock, as well as feet. Forgot feet. Now I want to kind of largely just assess our spine. So getting into our nice big Y position. I want feet to be about shoulder width apart. Toes are facing straight up to the ceiling. We're lightly pressing down into the floor with our heels with about 5 pounds of pressure. If you pushing down into the floor, you should notice the glutes are a little bit activated. Hands are coming up into a nice Y position. Fingers are open, palms are spread. Get a couple of nice deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. On your next inhale, as you exhale, we're going to take that left hand, we're reaching across the body. The head and the eyes are going to have to follow. So head is going to lift up. You're going to turn your eyes to see where you're going, and you're reaching to match fingertips to fingertips without losing that your heels. Heels are still lightly pressing into the floor. Inhale as we come back to the starting point. Exhale, reaching across to the other side. Oh, and that side is harder to get to. Inhale as we bring it down. Exhale as we reach across. When I reach with my left hand, this feels super easy, super smooth. No problem coming off the floor. I don't need to push into my feet a whole lot more. Real easy. When I reach with my right hand, I get stuck about right here. I have to put in a little bit more work and effort in order to push past that point in order to get further into my roll. So I have some significant tightness through this right side. Again, that's one of my kind of chronically tight areas, but that is a big contributing factor to the instability of that right leg. Maybe not so much a contributing factor, but it is a factor. It is definitely related. As we're going side to side, seeing if we can get things to open up a little bit more. Does it get a little easier with each one? Which that started to. We'll come back to our starting point, hands spread. We're now going to reach through the legs, lifting one leg up to the ceiling. We're going to reach across the body, and I want to keep that leg elevated high as if we're reaching up onto a shelf. As we reach, it's going to pull the hip up, pull the shoulder blade off the floor, but try to keep some contact with the back of the hand as you reach and point through those toes, trying to get as long as you comfortably can from fingertip to toe tip. Inhale as you bring that leg back down. Exhale as you reach across to the other side. As you reach through that leg, extending those toes like you're trying to reach those toes as far as they can go, start to counter reach through your fingertips. At the same time, you can spread those hands as wide as possible as you counter reach. How does this feel when you reach with that left foot compared to the right foot? So when I was reaching with my right shoulder across, it was a lot tighter, a lot harder to move. But when I reach with my right foot feels very free and mobile. This side feels easy. When I reach with my left foot, I can feel a little bit of that low back restriction as well as some restriction in my left shoulder. Now, I have some kind of chronic stuff in my left shoulder and neck. So that, again, that's all kind of part of the patterning, but it's relevant to gait mechanics and balance. And what you may start to notice as we're working through the baby roll stuff is the particular baby roll that you feel tight and restricted is going to be parallel to the standing position and the direction that you reach through your feet. That'll be something we'll have to come back to in another class. We're now going to flip over onto our belly, bringing arms straight up. I want the arms as tight to the ears as possible. Hands are spread. We're going to lift the elbows straight up to the ceiling. I want to keep that arm as tight to the ear as possible. As we're lifting, we can kind of peek through the eyes, looking into the corners of our eyes as we roll. I'm rolling as if I'm trying to roll onto my back. As I roll, that leg is allowed to slide up as long as we're keeping that knee in contact with the floor. See how far can you roll. Inhale as we slide that leg, coming back to start. Exhale as we lift to the other side. So that's tighter on this right side as I get into this one. Inhale, coming back to center. Now again, with that arm, I don't want that arm moving away from the ear to where it's going straight up to the ceiling. This is not the position. I want that arm tight to the ear so we're still reaching straight through the top of our head. Notice the difference of how this feels right side compared to left side. When I lift with my right hand or right shoulder, it's tighter and more restricted, especially in this right side low back. Although it's starting to loosen up just by moving into it. All right, our last assessment point for the baby rolls. Bringing arms straight out to the side with the palms down. We're going to bend one knee. Actively pull the toes towards your knee like you're trying to touch your knee with your toes. And from here, we're going to lift and push the heel like you're trying to touch the ceiling with just your heel. Inhale, we're letting that leg down, switching, doing the same thing to the other side. Pull the toes towards the knee, actively lift the heel like you're trying to touch the ceiling with the heel. Bring it back down, switch to the other side. Now, as I lift that heel, I want to keep my opposite hip, the front of that hip, on the floor. So I don't want to lift that heel and push through this opposite knee to where I get space on the front of this hip. This hip needs to stay down. No pressure going through this opposite leg. All I'm doing is driving that heel up. I don't want space to open up on the front of this hip. Inhale as we bring it across. Same thing to the other side. Now notice, are you able to lift both heels up to the same amount in the same degree? Does one side, do you feel that your body wants to push through that opposite knee, creating that space in order to help you elevate that heel? That's going to be an important assessment point. That difference from one side to the other is absolutely important. Good. Once we get 5 or so side to side, we're going to very slowly come back up to our standing. And we're going to go through our balance clock one more time. So again, nice spread toes, grounded foot, coming into our single leg balance. Slow reach into each number on the clock. Now, since this is our third time going through the clock, and we did a significant amount of mobility, you might find that your clock actually becomes less stable. You find more imbalance. That's not unusual. I actually consider that a good thing as long as we're being safe with it. If you feel unstable, have that staff next to you. I want to avoid falling, especially when we're doing our practice. And part of the reason you might find it's less stable is if we just opened up some mobility that your body has not had access to in a while, then you will not have a good neurology to support that mobility. And so it's going to feel unstable at first. And we want to feed that neurology, which is why we are coming back to the standing clock. So if you find, oh man, it's so much harder after mobilizing, that's a good thing. We want to spend some time programming that neurology so that you get better at it. And this is the ideal time to do it once you've actually increased that neurology, or that mobility, as long as we're staying safe with it. Switching to my other foot, left foot felt really, really solid, even better than it did the second round. Right foot, as I'm coming onto it, it already feels less. So this is the side that, this is my surgery side. It's an unstable knee. And I just increased mobility in my body significantly. And so now it feels a little bit more challenged. It's also a little fatigued because this is the third time we're doing this clock assessment. And the interesting thing about challenging balance and stability is it is neurologically taxing. So a little bit can go a long way. It can be very exhausting, especially if you're working on things that your body has some issues around. You haven't had if we're working into areas that you don't have good neurology, you're not going to be able to spend a ton of time on it because of the level of tax that it is to the system. We lost that one a little bit. As I'm getting into this, actually, right foot feels even more stable than it did in the last session. So it actually feels really, really good as I get through that. All right. So that was a huge assessment. More than likely, you have some discoveries in it, found areas of tightness and tension. I'm very, very curious how what you found mobility-wise relates to what you found in the balance and stability path part. What are those two things? How do they pair together? Great thing to bring into a consultation with me so we can talk about how to improve mobility and stability together.